Any breed of cattle is going to take longer to grow out than the other, smaller livestock species. The bigger the animal, the longer it takes to get from birth to slaughter. But we can't all carry the financial commitment of raising an animal for 2 to 3 years before it turns a profit for us. That's just not economical. Heritage breeds, no matter what the species, are not known for their fast-growing rates, and they just do better on natural forage. But there are a handful of options that can be kept for under 2 years without any additional bought for feed. So what are the top 8 breeds grow out and fatten the fastest on grass and field grazing? Plus, an honourable mention, let's get into it. Next we have Australia's very own Murray Grey cattle. They just celebrated 100 years as a breed in their very own right, though a completely accidental one. An Angus and a Shorthorn snuck away for a secret date, and the next thing their farmer knew, there were little grey calves running all over the place. The Angus and the Shorthorn are on our list for good reason, so you could just imagine what the progeny of these two super steers would be capable of. They require half the feed that other cattle do, and they finish in half the time too, and that's in 13 to 16 months. Birthing, health, and adaptable to any climate, all for half the feed. The Murray Greys are the ideal cattle for any kind of climate and space. As long as there's a little to feed themselves with, then you don't have to bother them until it's time to dress a carcass. The Bonsmara is a very new breed of cattle that originated in South Africa around 60 years ago. In the last 30 years or so, the breed's become a staple in the country, and for good reason. Bonsmaras are highly adaptable to the dry and harsh conditions of southern Africa, often making do with the least amount of forage. They're highly resistant to tick-borne diseases and make excellent mothers. It won't be long before they find their hooves in the grasslands of the US's southern states and in Australia. They were just made to brave the heat and the desert. They're a beef animal through and through, not leaving much room for milk outside of their own calves' needs. They mature between a year and a year and a half, and heifers are fertile for a good decade or more. We can't wait for this breed to make it across the ocean. They really have a knack for seeking out their own nutrition, no matter how empty the landscape might look to us. Milking Shorthorns have surprisingly fast maturing rates, and are the fastest maturing cattle on our list by a landslide. 6 to 9 months is all they need to reach maturity. And just because the name implies that they're a milking breed, do not think that that's all they're capable of. They make very good draft animals, they have a great carcass, and even more so when they can feed themselves on grassland, and land clearing is their specialty. There's a whole lot of flesh on this animal for the amount of time it takes to put it all on. We'd advise to grow them out for at least a year, but you can put them up in half that amount of time if you so wish. Shorthorns are another of those homesteader dream animals. They just tick all of the boxes you need from a cow, and they crossbreed well with others if you need to add some hardiness and milk production to the rest of your herd. Charolais cattle are a relatively unknown breed to us here in the US. You can find them here and there, but they aren't exactly numerous. This French breed is actually one of the oldest breeds in the world. And one thing about the older breeds is that they all do well on grass. Actually feeding them from a trough will negatively impact their health, and it's not like they absolutely need acres upon acres of grassland to satisfy them either. Their feed-to-growth ratio is some of the lowest you can ask for. Charolais are fully mature at a year old. We're a little surprised that they aren't a more popular homestead steer. They have a little milk to spare for the household. They're very chill and sociable, and those massive bodies require so much less than you'd expect. For the sheer amount of good quality beef you can get for so much less, they are a very viable choice for the small acreage. Herefords are a very underrated breed of cattle. They mature fast, and they tip the scale at the higher end of the medium breeds, with some considering them a large breed. Cows are ready to breed much earlier than most varieties of cattle, and bulls can be bred for twice the length that other breeds can. They are praised for their high-quality beef and their adaptability. Herefords are renowned for their pasture grass preferences, but they aren't limited to it. Given that they can thrive in the northern cold as well as the blisteringly hot southern hemisphere, it shouldn't be surprising that they produce a product that is dependent on their surroundings. If they're placed in drought and brush conditions like South Africa and Australia, they give a high-quality lean beef. If they are given a lot of additional feed, they develop that sought-after marbling. And if you put them on grassland pastures, they give a product that lies somewhere in the middle of those two extremes. Ideally, they're grown out for 2 years, but most of the time, they reach slaughter size at 16 to 18 months, depending on their health, genetics, and what feed they have at their disposal. Herefords are a little pricey to procure, and they aren't the best milkers, but most cows have enough milk for their calves. It's just that they are not an ideal dual-purpose breed. Herefords are meant to produce beef, pure and simple. And since we're on the Angus crossbreeds, have a look at the mighty Angus on its own. There's a reason that they're used to crossbreed so often. Longevity, fast maturing, highly adaptable, and dual-purpose. There are few breeds as well-rounded as the Angus. This will also be one of the easiest breeds on our list to procure. You can find them on every continent and nearly every country in the world. And specimens that have been crossed with Anguses deserve a second look from you too. Besides doing well on grass and free range, they're super docile and can be kept in smaller spaces if need be. Anguses are especially valuable to the small-scale farmer for 3 reasons. They do well on rotational grazing, their meat is easy to find a market for, and they also produce enough milk for the household and as a market product. Anguses can be processed at any point after they reach a year of age, ideally between 15 and 18 months old, but if you really need to go down to 12 months, you absolutely can. Of all of our options, the Angus is probably the most versatile and easy to rear for small-scale farmers. Wagyu cattle might not seem like the ideal candidate for a fast-growing steer, but hear us out. Ideally, to grow them out completely, they need around 3 years, but they can be slaughtered at around 18 months to 2 years, so you don't absolutely have to keep them for the full length of time. What makes this feasible is the female's fast maturing rate. They can be bred by a year of age, sometimes a month or 2 sooner. Having your cows breed consistently means more heads, and therefore you'll need to turn them over faster. The purebred red, brown, and black are a highly specialized breed that cannot be fed with just grazing alone. Well, they can, but the cut won't have quite the marbling that it is so prized for. But the Wagyu Angus crosses are a little different. These crossbreeds were made especially for their foraging capabilities to allow the everyday man to rear them. Do they produce the Kobe beef, 5-star level meat? Well, no, but it's still of a higher quality than your average cut, with good marbling throughout. The thing is, if Wagyu is not fed that specialized feed, they are actually pretty hardy foragers that aren't prone to too many ailments. But we feed them a rather unhealthy diet to produce that delectable cut. But Wagyu Angus crosses do a lot to solve these issues. It's a matter of opinion, though, and a lot of our viewers might not agree, but the higher market price and the ability to feed themselves in most climates offsets the additional care somewhat. Holsteins are one of the most popular breeds in the US for good reason. They grow fast and have the dual purpose of supplying you with both milk and beef. From birth to slaughter, you need to set aside 18 months for each head. Holsteins have 3 considerations to take in if you want to keep them. Firstly, they are sociable animals, and keeping only one is not advised. But luckily, they aren't super reliant on having hundreds of acres to feed themselves. They fare very well on smaller spaces, especially if they're being grazed rotationally. But you will need a few more acres than the average small homestead nonetheless. Secondly, they don't make good mothers. Luckily, the massive amounts of milk they produce offsets this extra labor from you somewhat, and they definitely have enough for their calves, and for you, they just have a habit of forgetting that they have babies to care for. And finally, they can't tolerate the high heat. So the Holsteins are reserved for our northern climates, and unfortunately, where there's deep snow in winter, there is also the need to supplement your livestock for at least a small fraction of the year. Holsteins are good enough foragers that if they are brought closer to the central United States, where the snow does not get as deep, you can lessen their additional feed greatly, hopefully only making use of it for a month or two in the year. But our favorite of all the fast-maturing grass-fed cattle are the Irish Dexter cattle. These are some of the smallest breeds of cattle in the world, but that size does not make them any less efficient than the bigger breeds. Dexters are here for the small acreages and the farms that are in unforgiving landscapes. They can find food absolutely anywhere, mountain ranges, in the desert, in the snow, and everywhere in between. And through all of that, they still manage to give 2 gallons of milk a day and a good quality lean cut without the need to overthink their care. They fare well in large herds and as a single freezer head to grow out on its own. And for 12 to 15 months before they can be taken to slaughter, that compact size and ease of care won't cost you much more than moving them every few days. Dexters are all over Europe and Southern Africa, but to a much lesser degree in the US, and that's a great shame. That size and low feed requirements allow for the smaller acreages to keep a herd and turn a profit without the enormous cost associated with specialized breeds or those huge beasts that just need too much feed for a small-scale farmer to undertake. But then again, it all depends on what your preferences are and what you want from your livestock. There's something out there for everyone, and most of the cattle breeds will do perfectly well on forage if you have it for them. If anything, they'll be so much happier and healthier if they have some room to seek out their own feed. And for those of us that can't set aside 3 years to raise a steer, well, here are our top 9 cattle breeds that mature the fastest on grazing and grass alone. Or did we miss one of your favorites? Let us know in the comments below. You know how much we appreciate our viewers' feedback. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe or have a look at one of our videos on your screen right now. Until next time, cheers.